Hello, everybody. This is Rogers Harrison. Welcome to another episode of the Sports Deep Dive Podcast. I'm joined sometimes, co-host by Brian Koperick, and today just happens to be one of those times. Hello, Brian.
Hey, Rogers. How are you today?
I'm fabulous. I'm just happy to be here any way that I can help the team. All right. So, Brian, if you're ready, we're going to get right into it.
Okay. Let's do it.
Hillary is history and buys our plays. We've got the stories from the glory days. Don't just watch the scoreboard, know the game. Be the smartest person in the frame. Sports deep dive, give him something more. Sports deep dive, give him something more.
All right, Brian, long before he was the Iron Hand of NASCAR, Bill France Sr. was just a kid in Washington, D.C. with a father who wanted him to be a banker. Born William Henry Getty France in 1909 in Washington, D.C., he grew up in a middle-class environment. His father was a banker, and for a brief time, Bill actually followed in those footsteps, working as a bank teller. So imagine a teenager working as a teller, staring at the clock and dreaming of anything that moved fast.
Yeah.
He wasn't the academic type. He was the type to skip class, quote, borrow the family Model T, and head out to the 1.5-mile broad tracks in Laurel, Maryland. This is where the Big Bill persona actually started in the stealth. Because he would run laps at high speeds on those dangerous wooden planks, then rush home to park the car exactly as he found it before his father got back from work.
Oh, sneaky, sneaky.
There was an early tragedy that likely hardened that famous iron will of his as well. When Bill was only 10, his older brother James drowned while they were wading in a creek. It's a moment many biographers point to as the point where Bill felt he had to carry the weight of his family's future on his own shoulders.
Yeah. I mean, you hear that story a lot, right? Something happens to the one brother or another, and the other brother feels that responsibility, especially back in that time,
Yeah.
right? Yep.
So by 1934, Bill had a wife, Ann, a young son, and a total lack of patience for the D.C. winter and the Depression-era economy.
Yeah.
He packed up his life, grabbed his tools, and headed south with less than $100 in his pocket. Now, keep in mind, 1934, Depression, $100, that's a pretty good sum of money.
Yeah, it was a decent amount.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that brings to bear a little bit of a conversation that you and I had earlier this week, where we were talking about how lots of people from that era and a few eras up could just strike out with like a small amount of money,
Yeah.
or literally nothing, and then build something great. And how much harder that is in today's world.
Right. Like, hey, I went to New York City from Europe with $10 in my pocket, and now I own half of Manhattan, or,
Right.
Whatever,
Right.
those stories.
And there's a ton of those stories out there, like this one, you
Yeah.
know, but it's pretty cool. It's inspiring, but
Yep.
not as realistic in today's world.
Correct. So he was actually aiming, when he pointed the car from DC, he was actually aiming for Miami.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to go south, that's as south as you're going to get.
Yeah.
But as fate would have it, his car broke down in Daytona Beach. He looked at
Not a bad place to break down.
Right. Yep. He looked at the beach racing scene and saw the potential in the sand and decided to plant his flag right there. He opened a gas station on Main Street, and that small shop quickly became the unofficial war room for every mechanic and driver in town.
He built the culture.
Yep, he did. So, so in those early days, Bill was right in the thick of it. He wasn't just a promoter, he was a competitor. In 1936, the city tried to run a race on a course that was half pavement and half soft beach sand. That sounds awful.
The soft beach sand sounds awful.
Yes. It was a complete disaster.
Probably all the cars got stuck.
Cars were getting stuck in the tide, and the city lost a fortune. Now, Bill drove in that race and finished fifth, but he walked away with a bigger prize. The realization that the race failed because the operations were a mess, not the sport itself.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, so then came World War II, which could have been the end of the story for a lot of promoters. But Bill adapted. He spent the war years at the Daytona Beach Boat Works managing crews, building sub-chasers and motor launches for the Navy.
A lot of people did that, but that's really cool how he just shifted right over, right?
Yep.
I mean, yeah.
That shipyard wasn't just a job, it was his master class in project management. He learned how to lead large, rowdy crews under high-pressure deadlines.
Yeah.
When the war ended in 1945, the country was restless. It was ready for entertainment. So Bill saw the chaos of post-war racing, promoters skipping town with prize money and every track having different rules, and he knew someone had to bring order to the madness. And he figured that someone ought to be him.
Well, a smart figuring.
In December of 1947, he called a legendary meeting at the Streamline Hotel. France gathered drivers, owners, and mechanics to the meeting. He sat the drivers and the owners down and told them his vision. A sanctioning body called NASCAR that offered uniform rules and guaranteed purses. Now, NASCAR, if you don't know, Brian, stands for National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing. I'm going to say it again. NASCAR, National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing.
Yeah. Emphasis on stock car.
Ladies and gentlemen, he said that because Brian Goperick is a fan of the Indy cars.
No, well, F1. No, I'm just saying. No, yeah. That statement is when it started, it was like cars off the street that went racing. Now, it's still, people will say the same thing I said, but it still is in a measure stock because the cars all have to have the same, they're very strict regulations, right? Which is what Bill was all about.
Yeah.
To make he was a driver's promoter. Like he wanted the driver to win, not the car.
Correct. So NASCAR, it's a name that perfectly captured Bill Francis Sr.'s vision, moving away from the disorganized local modified races and creating a single national standard. He wanted to prove that auto racing could be professional industry, and the stock car part was his big gamble. The idea that fans would pay to see the same cars they could buy at a dealership, which you just said. So from there, the Iron Fist really came out. When star driver Curtis Turner tried to organize a drivers' union with support from Teamsters, France issued a lifetime ban against him and Tim Flock.
Yeah.
Ouch. He famously said he'd rather plow up the track than let a union in. By the mid-1960s, NASCAR was facing competition and a car count problem. To put on the big shows that fans were paying for, he needed his stars back. He eventually lifted the ban in 1965. He didn't lift the ban because he started liking unions. He lifted it because his rate of return on the races was higher with those drivers in the field.
And it's interesting because there's a big scuttlebutt right now in NASCAR because of a YouTuber named Cletus McFarland or Garrett Mitchell, and he is now participating in NASCAR. And a lot of the NASCAR elite are, having some issues with NASCAR allowing him to race. But the reason that NASCAR is interested in allowing him to race is because he has millions of followers. And so even at the lower levels of racing, he's affecting the ratings big time when he's out there on the track.
Nice. Okay. Let me tell you about 1969 in Talladega, Alabama.
Oh, yeah.
So, the fastest track in the world opened in Talladega, Alabama in 1969. Drivers were terrified that tires couldn't handle the 200-mile-per-hour speeds. Richard Petty and the Professional Drivers Association, known as PDA, boycotted the inaugural race. The 60-year-old Bill got in a car himself and ran laps at 160 miles per hour just to prove them wrong. He didn't just build a sport, he willed it into existence.
And you got to give him a lot of respect for that. He didn't just get mad and be like, "Oh, you guys are dummies, go do it." He went out there to prove them wrong, And I think one of the things I really respect about him was he was a driver first.
Yep.
All this other stuff came from his love of racing that started very, very early on.
Well, and another thing is that you've got owners in professional sports, whether it's the Big Four, NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, the NHL, or even Major League Soccer, and NASCAR, you've got these owners who just like owning sports and never played or participated the sport or the team that they own. But you're right. I mean, Bill France Sr., former driver, started this, put down some rules, guaranteed the money, and, when this fast track opened up and a lot of drivers were scared to run it, he was like, yeah, whatever, and got in his car, ran 160 miles per hour, and proved them wrong.
Right.
I mean, he defied Richard Petty. Richard Petty, known as the King.
Well, and rightly so.
Yeah.
But he did. He defied him. And he showed him that it was possible, right?
Right.
And Talladega is still one of the faster tracks in NASCAR. And one of the... I mean, I don't think there's ever not been a year that they didn't run races there, right?
Yeah.
Since then.
So, as Bill France Sr. moved into the final chapters of his career, he shifted from being a local promoter to a national architect. He wasn't just organizing races anymore. He was building monuments to speed and navigating the complicated transition of passing a kingdom to the next generation. By the late 1950s, the beach course at Daytona had reached its limit. It was iconic, but it was sandy, unpredictable, and couldn't hold the massive crowds Bill had envisioned. So he decided to gamble everything on building a permanent home for the sport. In 1959, he opened Daytona International Speedway. It was a massive 2.5-mile tri-oval with 31-degree banking, so steep that people could literally thought cars would fly off the top. It changed the rate of speed for the entire sport overnight, and the first Daytona 500 became the proof of concept that stock car racing was a big lead television property. So, 10 years later, he went even bigger in Alabama with Talladega.
Mm-hmm.
If Daytona was a cathedral, Talladega was the beast. At 2.6 miles. It remains the fastest track on the circuit, like you pointed out. The expansion wasn't just about geography; it was about being legit. By building these super speedways, France forced the automotive world and the national sponsors like Winston to treat NASCAR as a professional industry rather than a regional hobby.
Right.
Um, so, in 1972, France did something many founders find impossible. He stepped down while he was still at the top of his game. He handed the presidency of NASCAR over to his son, Bill France Jr.
Yep.
This marked the beginning of the modern era. Jr. took over the day-to-day operations and the corporate expansion. France Sr. remained a powerful advisor, often seen in the garage area or the boardroom, making sure the iron will of the France family remained the guiding force. So one thing that I noticed, and then you can talk about this, is the fact that, so, during the, I want to say, mid to late 90s, maybe early 2000s, NASCAR started to expand. And it was more than just the Southeast. I mean, they would run races in California. I think they even went up to the Indianapolis 500, and they called it the Brickyard
500.
the Brickyard 500, and they would race on that iconic track. And if you haven't heard our Indianapolis 500 podcast episode, I invite you to go do that. So what do you think about that? I mean, do you think that, that expansion, though, made NASCAR popular, but it might have happened too soon, too quick. Does that make sense?
Like they expanded too much, too fast?
Yeah. What do you think?
I think the only thing that really hurt them in that was that they did kind of go away from some of their more iconic older tracks to do it. But also around that time, they made those moves because they were struggling a little bit.
Mm.
80s was like a heyday for NASCAR.
Yeah.
And then in the early 90s and stuff, I think it started to wane a bit. You know how all sports kind of have ebbs and flows of popularity. And so I think this was their attempt to do like NFL's doing with going to Europe and Canada and Mexico and like all the places to play. They were trying to extend their reach. Prior to that, it was mostly an East Coast, corridor of racetracks.
Not only that, but Southeast.
Yeah.
The Carolinas and Florida, Georgia and Alabama.
Tennessee, yeah.
So,
and so moving westward and trying to build a fan base beyond just, their regional area. I can't say I faulted them for it. Yeah, maybe they did go a little bananas with it, but,
Another question I have for you. We're going to play the what if game.
Okay.
All right, so if Chris Turner had been successful in bringing the Teamsters into NASCAR in 1961, what do you think the sport would look like today? Would it be, all right, so you've got leagues like the NBA, which are very player-centric leagues. Meaning that, people will root for their teams, Golden State Warriors, Los Angeles Lakers, Boston Celtics, that type of thing. But they also more root for players. LeBron James comes to mind.
Yeah.
And
Michael Jordan,
Yeah, and it says players jump around.
Yeah, Shaq.
Yeah.
You know.
Then it's like, oh, I was a fan of the Cavaliers, but now that LeBron's over the Lakers, I'm a fan of the Lakers. Type of thing.
Yeah. Um.
But I mean, so would it have been like that? What would have happened if it had been unionized in '61?
I mean, it ended up unionized anyway,
Yeah, yeah.
and
But I guess what I'm saying is that if Bill had backed down,
do you
right?
think it would have given him, like, if it would have given the unions more power than
Yeah,
they
the
got
drivers
later
could just
on?
walk all over him, type of
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, I think there's an argument for either side, right? I don't think the drivers' union is really extremely powerful in the race sport, but it has made things not be so one sided to the Francis, and the
Yeah,
owners. Um, on the flip side, like, it wasn't that many years later that they did unionize, so one could argue he just delayed the inevitable, you know.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I guess showing that he would just lock them out if they pushed it too far
yeah.
might have been a good power move.
Um, so let's talk about the final year or so. Bill France Sr.'s health began to decline in the late '80s as he battled Alzheimer's disease. Even as his memory faded, his presence was still felt across the sport he built from $100 Dream. I would like to go down to Daytona and find the original gas station or mechanic shop and see what that is now. If it's still a gas station, if it's like a NASCAR museum, or
Right,
or
right.
What
Is it?
Yeah. So Bill France Sr. passed away on June 7th, 1992, at his home in Daytona Beach at the age of 82.
Good long life.
His death marked the end of an era, but the timing was pretty good. In 1992, the sport was on the verge of a massive cultural explosion. Richard Petty was in his fan appreciation tour. That was, his retirement year. A young driver named Jeff Gordon was about to make his debut.
Yep.
France lived just long enough to see his strictly stock gamble grow into a multi-billion-dollar empire that dominated the American sports landscape. Bill France Sr., he didn't just invent a sport, he invented a lifestyle. He understood long before the NFL or the NBA did that the logo had to be bigger than the players.
Yeah.
By creating a sanctioning body, he ensured that the fans family owned the rules, the records, and the rights. His legacy is visible every time a driver hits the high banks of a super speedway.
Mm-hmm.
Before Bill, stock car was a loose term for moonshine runners in their modified Ford. After Bill, it became $1 billion entry point for global manufacturers like Chevrolet, Ford, and Toyota.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, Brian. So I think the greatest legacy isn't the tracks or the trophies. It's the consistency.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
In a world of sports where teams move cities and leagues fold overnight, NASCAR has remained family-owned, Florida-based empire for nearly 80 years.
Yeah.
Bill France Sr. started with a toolkit and a broken-down car in the Daytona sand, and he ended by leaving a blueprint for how to turn a regional passion into an American institution.
Yeah.
He was a man who taught us that if you want to win the race, you don't have to be the fastest driver. You have to own the track.
Yeah.
He started as a mechanic who had to crank start his neighbor's cars in the morning, and ended as the man who revolutionized the way the world looks at a checkered flag. And like I said, I'd like to go down to Daytona and find that gas station and see what it is. Like I said, is it still a gas station or an auto shop? Is it a NASCAR museum? You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what it was. Or what it is. I'm sorry. Any final thoughts from you?
No, just, another great podcast, Rogers. I mean, just, what an icon Bill France is, and neat to get a little more insight into his journey and how NASCAR came to be.
Yeah. And as we move on in this podcast, we'll talk more about NASCAR. We might do a podcast on Richard Petty. We might do one on one of my favorite drivers back in the 80s. That was Bill Elliott.
Yeah, Dale Earnhardt would be a good one.
Dale Earnhardt. We could do a tag team one of senior and junior.
Yeah.
Maybe together.
Yeah.
Um,
And Richard Childress would be an interesting one. He's built a racing empire.
Yeah.
As a team owner and driver, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah. And then we also mentioned Jeff Gordon.
yeah,
It might be an interesting take as well.
the golden boy of NASCAR.
Well, I mean, because he didn't look like the
No, that's why I said the
rough-
golden boy of
Yeah.
NASCAR.
All right, everybody. As always, it's commercial free. We thank you. We don't want to bog you down with lots of commercials. We want you to listen to the podcast and either start or end your day. He's Brian Goperick. I am Rogers Harrison. And I'm just going to say, call everyone.